Zora Johnson, a 7-year-old black girl, stands trembling before a panel of glaring white police officers. Her small brown hands, cuffed as tears, stream down her face. An officer tosses crime scene photos of a white child's bloody shoe onto the table, demanding answers. The billionaire father, Harrison Palmer, bursts into the interrogation room, points at Zora, and shouts accusations about his missing daughter, Lily. Instead of cowering, Zora lifts her chin and declares, "I saved her life, and I can prove it if you let me speak." The room falls silent as security camera footage begins to play on the wall screen. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe to follow Zora's incredible journey from accused criminal to unexpected hero. Can one brave little girl overcome a system stacked against her? Let's find out what really happened at that fateful moment in the park. Zora lived in Oakwood Heights, a struggling Chicago neighborhood with crumbling infrastructure and underfunded schools, a stark contrast to the gleaming skyscrapers visible on the horizon. Her home was a modest 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her hard-working single mother, Maya Johnson, who had been cleaning offices at Palmer Industries for 8 years, despite having a computer science degree that employers seemed to overlook once they saw her name and address. Despite their financial hardships, Maya always made sure Zora had opportunities to nurture her artistic talents, enrolling her in free weekend art classes at the Oakwood Heights Community Center, where Miss Jefferson, an elderly art teacher who had mentored generations of neighborhood children, praised Zora for her exceptional observational skills and attention to detail. That Saturday had begun like any other, with Zora carefully organizing her sketchbook and colored pencils in her backpack, ready for a day of drawing at the community center, when Maya received an emergency call requiring weekend overtime at Palmer Tower to prepare for a major corporate event. With no childcare available on such short notice, Maya had no choice but to bring Zora along, promising they could visit Lakefront Park near the Palmer estate afterward as a special treat. When they arrived at the immaculate grounds of Palmer Industries, Zora immediately noticed how security guards followed her mother with their eyes despite her employee badge, while white employees walked through unbothered. As Maya cleaned the executive offices, she whispered to Zora to sit quietly in the break room, but the receptionist quickly informed them that her kind needed to wait in the service area, instead a dingy room next to the loading dock. 4 hours later, exhausted but finished with her extra shift, Maya finally took Zora to the promised park visit, settling her daughter near an ornate marble fountain with her art supplies while she rested on a nearby bench. The spring sunshine warmed Zora's shoulders as she opened her sketchbook, her attention immediately captured by a little white girl about 6 years old, wearing a frilly pink dress who was being led through the park by a uniformed caretaker in a crisp blue outfit and a beautiful golden retriever wearing a service vest. Zora watched fascinated as the girl navigated with remarkable confidence despite wearing specialized dark glasses that suggested she could not see. The child, who Zora would soon learn was Lily Palmer, seemed to use the sounds of the fountain and the guidance of her service dog to create a mental map of her surroundings, occasionally stopping to touch flowers or decorative statues with delicate fingers. When Lily dropped her specialized audiobook device on the pathway, Zora instinctively jumped up to help, approaching with a friendly, "I can get that for you," only to have the caretaker snatch it away with a cold, "We don't need your help. Get back to your own area." A dismissal punctuated with a glance that made Zora feel as if she were something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Hurt but undeterred, Zora returned to her sketching spot, her artist's eye still drawn to the interesting contrast between Lily's confident movements and her obvious blindness, beginning to capture the scene in her sketchbook while trying to ignore the sting of the caretaker's words. 20 minutes later, Zora noticed the caretaker receive a phone call that transformed her demeanor from professional to nervous, her posture stiffening as she checked her watch repeatedly and began scanning the park with anxious eyes. Something about the change made Zora uneasy enough to continue watching instead of returning to her, drawing a feeling that intensified when just minutes later a different person wearing a similar blue uniform approached Lily and her. Caretaker exchanged whispered words and then reached down toward the service dog with something concealed in their hand. To Zora's horror, the dog suddenly wobbled on its feet and lay down, appearing disoriented, while the new caretaker took Lily's hand, saying something that made the little girl look confused but compliant as she was led away from her. Now semi-conscious service animal. Everything about the situation felt wrong to Zora, who looked toward her mother only to find Maya had dozed off on the bench, exhausted from her extra shift and unaware of the scene unfolding across the park. In that crucial moment, Zora faced a terrible choice. She could wake her mother and try to convince adults to help, risking disbelief and delay, because who would take the word of a poor black child over uniformed staff, or she could follow her instincts and do something herself before Lily disappeared forever. With her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird, Zora made her decision and slipped away from the fountain, her sketchbook clutched tightly in her small hands, as she followed the kidnapper and Lily toward a more secluded area of the park, completely unaware that this single brave choice would soon entangle her in a conspiracy far more dangerous than she could possibly imagine. The kidnapper moved with purpose, steering Lily through a less traveled path, bordered by tall hedges that blocked them from the view of other park-goers, repeatedly checking over his shoulder, but failing to notice the small black girl, trailing at a careful distance. Zora stayed hidden behind trees and shrubs, grateful for her many weekends, exploring this same park with her mother, knowledge that now gave her a crucial advantage as she tracked the suspicious pair toward the park's eastern maintenance area. When they passed a dense cluster of rhododendrons, Zora quietly tore a page from her sketchbook, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the bushes to their right, creating a rustling sound that caused the kidnapper to stop abruptly and investigate, giving Zora precious seconds to circle ahead, using a parallel path she knew would reconnect just beyond a maintenance shed. Positioning herself behind a large oak tree, Zora held her breath as the kidnapper and Lily approached close enough now that she could hear the man speak sharply into a cell phone. "I have the package, but there might be complications. The mutt was handled, but someone could notice soon. Meet me at exit 4 instead of 3. 10 minutes. The calculated reference to Lily as the package erased any lingering doubts in Zora's mind that this was a real kidnapping, not some misunderstanding, and her heart raced as she realized she was now the only person who could help this blind girl who was being led straight into danger. With trembling fingers, Zora quickly sketched Lily's face, tore out the page, and carefully dropped it near where the service dog had been left behind, hoping the animal might recover enough to follow its owner's scent on the paper. Gathering her courage, she then stepped directly into the path ahead of the kidnapper and Lily, adopting the cheerful voice she had heard park tour guides use. "Welcome to our special garden tour for young visitors. Would you like to learn about the secret flowers that only bloom when brave children find them?" The kidnapper froze, clearly startled by her sudden appearance, while Lily's head tilted curiously toward the sound of a child's voice. Before the man could react, Zora continued speaking, weaving code words into her impromptu tour speech. "We're actually in the danger garden right now, where false guides sometimes try to take children to the BAD exit instead of the safe center fountain, where parents wait and worry." She emphasized certain words, praying that Lily would sense something was wrong, even as the kidnapper's face darkened with anger, and he grabbed Zora's arm with bruising force, hissing, "Shut your mouth, you little black brat, or I'll shut it permanently." His grip tightened painfully as he spat racial slurs that made Zora flinch, but she kept her eyes fixed on Lily, whose expression had changed from confusion to concern as she picked up on the tension in both voices. When the kidnapper tried to drag both girls toward the nearby maintenance shed, Zora made a split-second decision and screamed at the top of her lungs, simultaneously kicking a metal trash can that crashed against the shed door with a resounding bang. The commotion had its intended effect as a low growl came from behind them, where Lily's service dog had staggered to its feet, disoriented but alert enough to recognize a threat to its owner from Zora's deliberate noise and scent of Lily on the discarded sketch. In the moment of chaos that followed, the dog lunged forward on unsteady legs, teeth bared at the kidnapper who released Zora's arm to defend himself, creating the opening she needed to grab Lily's hand, whispering urgently, "I'm a friend. Your dog knows I'm helping. We need to run now." Whether it was trust instinct or simply the contrast between Zora's genuine concern and the kidnapper's cruel grip, Lily nodded and allowed Zora to pull her away as the service dog created a barrier between them and the furious kidnapper. As they fled Zora's handmade friendship bracelet, a colorful band woven from threads she had collected over months, caught on a low branch and tore from her wrist, falling unnoticed onto the pathway behind them. A small piece of identifying evidence that would later become crucially important in ways she couldn't possibly anticipate. Running as fast as Lily could manage with Zora's guidance, they dove into the botanical garden's maze of pathways, momentarily escaping their pursuer, but painfully aware that they were now two children alone against unknown numbers of kidnappers, with no easy way to prove what was happening or who was telling the truth in a world that would likely believe a uniformed adult over a small black girl from the wrong side of town. Especially one who now appeared to be running away with a wealthy white man's blind daughter clutched by the hand. What would you do if you were 7 years old alone in a park and suddenly responsible for saving another child from kidnappers who could easily claim you were the real criminal? This impossible situation now faced Zora as she led Lily deeper into the botanical garden, her mind racing to formulate a plan, while staying hidden from the growing number of searchers she could spot through the foliage. "They're everywhere," Zora whispered, peering through a gap in the ornamental hedges to see 3 men in maintenance uniforms speaking into earpieces, coordinating their search with hand signals that reminded her of police shows her mother forbade her to watch. Zora noticed with rising panic that they had positioned someone near each park exit, creating an inescapable perimeter around the 20-acre park that grew tighter by the minute. Even worse, she overheard one kidnapper instructing security officers that a little black girl has taken the Palmer heiress and providing a description of Zora that made her sound like a dangerous criminal rather than a would-be rescuer. When Lily began breathing rapidly, overwhelmed by the tension and unfamiliar surroundings without her service dog to help her navigate, Zora remembered what Miss Jefferson had taught her about her cousin's sensory sensitivities. "Can I touch your shoulders?" Zora asked softly, and when Lily nodded, she gently applied steady pressure, the way she'd seen Miss Jefferson do, speaking in a calm, measured voice. "Focus on my voice, Lily. The sounds around us are just a garden symphony like music. Can you hear the different bird songs, the fountain to our left?" The simple technique worked as Lily's breathing steadied, and she revealed something unexpected. "I have perfect pitch. I can tell exactly what notes sounds make. Your voice is mostly E-flat and a warm tones." This revelation gave Zora an idea, and she quickly devised a communication system where different whispered notes would mean stop, go duck down, and danger, allowing them to move stealthily through the gardens with Lily's extraordinary hearing, serving as their early warning system, while Zora provided visual guidance. Their newfound teamwork was immediately tested when Lily detected footsteps approaching from a path to their right before Zora could see anyone coming, giving them precious seconds to hide beneath the broad leaves of an elephant ear plant display. Working together with growing confidence, they carefully made their way toward the park's western entrance, where Zora had spotted a police officer earlier, hoping an official authority would help them. Their hope crumbled when they overheard one kidnapper speaking to that very officer, describing Zora as a dangerous little thug from Oakwood Heights who lured and grabbed the blind Palmer girl, adding that she probably wants ransom money. The officer's immediate response revealed his bias as he replied, "Those Oakwood kids are starting younger and younger with their crimes. Don't worry, I'll detain her on sight." Retreating quickly, Lily clutched Zora's hand and whispered, "I believe you, not them. My father gave me an emergency phone in my special backpack. We can call for help." The discovery of the hidden phone momentarily lifted their spirits, until Lily's call to her father's personal assistant was dismissed as a prank. When Zora tried to explain the situation, the woman cutting her off mid-sentence. with "Stop wasting our time with these ridiculous stories" before hanging up abruptly. With options dwindling rapidly, Zora remembered that her mother's friend, Mrs. Chen, worked at the Chicago Public Library just 3 blocks from the park's north exit, and she made the decision to risk the heavily watched exit to reach this potential sanctuary. "We'll move when the fountain show starts," Zora told Lily, knowing the park's famous musical water display would soon create the perfect distraction with its crowd-drawing spectacle. When the music began, and water jets shot skyward, they seized their chance, slipping through the gathering crowd toward the exit. But just as freedom seemed within reach, one of the kidnappers spotted them and shouted orders to his accomplices. In a split-second decision that would haunt Zora for days to come, she pushed Lily into a dense group of tourists with urgent instructions to stay with the largest crowd and scream if anyone but me approaches you, while she ran in the opposite direction, hoping to draw their pursuers away. Her desperate diversion worked too well, as multiple men chased after her, allowing her to circle back toward Lily's last position several minutes later, breathless and scraped from diving under bushes to escape capture. But when Zora returned to the spot where she had left Lily, the blind girl was nowhere to be found, having vanished completely amid the busy park paths now swarming with searchers, calling Lily's name in seemingly genuine concern. A nearby conversation between park security guards revealed the horrifying truth: the Palmer girl's been found and taken back to Palmer Tower. They say some street kid from Oakwood tried to kidnap her but ran off. Zora stood frozen in shock, realizing that Lily had been rescued by the very people they had been running from and was now potentially in more danger than ever, while Zora herself had been successfully framed as the kidnapper. The question now burned in her mind like a wildfire, impossible to ignore. How could she, a 7-year-old black girl from a neighborhood that everyone looked down upon, possibly infiltrate one of Chicago's most secure buildings to save a billionaire's daughter, who everyone now believed she had tried to harm? If you were in Zora's shoes, would you walk away to protect yourself or risk everything to save Lily? Comment number 1, if you think Zora should find an adult to help. Or number 2, if she should try to rescue Lily herself. Like and subscribe to find out what this brave little girl decides to do next against impossible odds. Will Zora's mother believe what happened? Or will even she think her daughter has done something terrible? And what awaits Lily back at Palmer Tower, supposedly safe in her father's domain, but possibly surrounded by the very people who orchestrated her kidnapping? Palmer Tower loomed 90 stories above Chicago's downtown, like a gleaming silver needle piercing the sky. Its reflective glass exterior, displaying none of the desperation Zora felt as she stood across the street, a tiny figure dwarfed by the massive structure where Lily had been taken. Security guards with earpieces patrolled the main entrance, checking IDs and turning away anyone without appointments, making a frontal approach impossible for a child already being described as a kidnapper on the security channels she had overheard in the park. Fighting back tears of frustration, Zora clutched her mother's spare janitorial access card that Maya always kept in her purse for emergencies. The simple plastic rectangle now representing her only chance of entering the Prosit 6 fortress-like building undetected. Taking a deep breath, Zora circled the block to the service entrance she had used that morning with her mother, waiting until a delivery truck arrived and slipping in behind it while the security guard was distracted checking manifests. Once inside the loading dock area, she pulled her hoodie over her head and walked purposefully toward the service elevator, mimicking the confident stride of the maintenance workers she had observed, keeping her eyes downcast whenever actual employees passed by. The access card worked with a soft beep, opening doors that would otherwise remain firmly shut against unauthorized visitors, allowing her to ascend to the 70th floor, where executive offices occupied the entire level. Through careful observation and occasional eavesdropping, as she navigated service corridors and maintenance passages, Zora learned that Harrison Palmer himself had returned from a business trip upon hearing about his daughter's rescue, and was currently meeting with security personnel to review the incident. Following the sounds of an authoritative voice, Zora discovered a small air vent in a maintenance closet that overlooked Palmer's private office, allowing her to witness an interaction that chilled her blood despite the building's warm air. Harrison Palmer, a tall man with steel-gray hair and expensive suit that screamed wealth and power, was speaking with his head of security while reviewing footage from the park. His voice tense, but oddly lacking the emotional distress Zora would expect from a father whose child had nearly been kidnapped. "So, you're telling me the extraction was interrupted by some random child who happened to be in the park?" Palmer demanded, his tone suggesting irritation rather than gratitude toward the person who had protected his daughter. Before the security chief could answer, another figure entered the room. A striking woman with platinum blonde hair styled in a severe bob, wearing a blood-red business suit that matched her lipstick. "Harrison, we need to talk privately," she stated, dismissing the security team with an imperious wave of her manicured hand. Once alone, the woman's professional demeanor shifted to cold fury as she addressed Palmer. "You promised me this would go smoothly. Do you have any idea how many resources I committed to this operation? The insurance policy is already filed. The stock maneuvers are in progress, and now instead of having your daughter safely secured at the designated location, she's back here where anyone might speak with her." Zora had to press her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp as the terrible truth became clear. Lily's kidnapping had been planned by her own father as part of some complex financial scheme. Palmer's response confirmed her worst fears as he ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "This wasn't my fault, Catherine. Your people should have secured the area better. How was I supposed to anticipate some ghetto kid would play hero?" The woman who Zora now understood must be Catherine Voss Palmer's business partner, whose name she had seen on plaques throughout the building, stepped closer to Palmer, with a threatening posture that made him flinch visibly. "Fix this, Harrison. Your debt to my organization doesn't disappear because of one complication. We need the girl removed from the building immediately before she speaks to anyone else about what happened in the park. I've already adjusted the narrative to paint the black child as the attempted kidnapper, which works perfectly given the demographics and crime rates we can cite from her neighborhood." The casual racism in her statement made Zora's skin crawl, but the conversation took an unexpected turn when Palmer showed the first signs of genuine concern for his daughter. "I agreed to a controlled situation where Lily would be, well treated, just scared enough to make the story convincing. Your men drugged her service dog, Catherine. That wasn't part of the plan, and from what security told me, they were rough with her. I'm having second thoughts about all of this." Voss's laugh lacked any warmth as she towered over Palmer, despite her shorter stature. "Second thoughts don't erase $7 million in gambling debts to my associates, Harrison. You'll do exactly as planned, or those debts won't be the only thing you need to worry about. I've already sent my men to collect your daughter from the medical suite, where they're checking her over. The story will be that the traumatic experience requires specialized care at a private facility, and by the time anyone thinks to question it, the insurance payout will be complete and your financial problems solved." Their conversation was interrupted when Palmer's phone buzzed with a message that made his face drain of color. "The medical team says Lily is talking about a girl named Zora who saved her and asking for her. She seems to trust this child completely." Voss's expression hardened further as she snapped, "Find this Zora person and make sure she cannot interfere again. My men will handle the girl, permanently if necessary." The chilling implications of that final word sent ice through Zora's veins, causing her to jerk backward in shock, accidentally knocking a broom that clattered loudly against the closet wall. The noise immediately attracted attention as a security guard called out, "Who's there?" and began moving toward her hiding spot. With no time to find another exit, Zora burst from the closet and ran blindly down the corridor, alarms blaring overhead as a voice on the intercom announced security alert all floors. Unauthorized intruder, juvenile female, approximately 7 years old, wearing blue hoodie and jeans. Approach with caution, suspected kidnapper on premises. The irony of being labeled the kidnapper while trying to prevent an actual kidnapping might have made Zora laugh if she weren't terrified running through the labyrinthine hallways of Palmer Tower with security closing in from all directions desperately seeking a way to reach Lily, before Voss's men could take her away to some unknown location where not even her father might be able to find her again. The security team cornered Zora in the executive bathroom, where she had attempted to hide two large men in suits, dragging her struggling form to a conference room, despite her protests and attempts to explain the danger to Lily. "I'm telling the truth, please listen to me." "Lily is in danger from Miss Voss," Zora shouted as they deposited her roughly in a chair, one guard remaining to watch her while the other spoke into his radio requesting instructions. After several tense minutes during which Zora tried repeatedly to reason with her stone-faced guard, the door opened to reveal Harrison Palmer himself, accompanied by a security officer leading a clearly distressed Lily, whose face brightened immediately at the sound of Zora's voice. "Zora, you came to find me," Lily exclaimed, trying to move toward her friend only to be held back by the officer. Palmer's expression shifted from confused to furious as he looked between the two girls, addressing Zora with undisguised contempt. "So you're the little delinquent who interfered with my daughter today. Do you have any idea the trouble you've caused? Or was that your plan all along to create a scene so you could, what, demand money later?" The accusation stung Zora like a physical slap. But before she could defend herself, Lily pulled away from her handler with surprising strength and moved unerringly toward Zora's voice, her hands outstretched. "Daddy, stop it. Zora saved me from the bad man in the park. He wasn't a real caretaker. He hurt Daisy with something that made her sleepy, and he said I was just a package to be delivered. Zora helped me escape and protected me." The conviction in Lily's voice momentarily silenced Palmer, whose expression betrayed conflicting emotions as his carefully constructed narrative began to crumble in the face of his comforted daughter's unwavering testimony. The tense standoff was interrupted by the conference room door swinging open to admit Catherine Voss, flanked by two men, whose bulging jackets suggested concealed weapons, their expressions making it clear they weren't regular security personnel. "Harrison, why is this child still here? She should have been removed from the building immediately," Voss stated coldly, her eyes fixing on Zora with calculated assessment that made the girl shrink back instinctively. Something in Voss's tone and the predatory stance of her companions seemed to trigger a realization in Palmer, whose gaze darted between his business partner and his daughter with growing comprehension. Before he could respond, Zora gathered her courage and spoke directly to Palmer. "I heard everything from the maintenance closet. I know Miss Voss planned the kidnapping with you because of gambling debts, but her men weren't following your plan. They were going to hurt Lily, maybe worse, and now they're here to take her away again." The room erupted into chaos as Voss barked orders to her men while Palmer, in a surprising move, positioned himself between them and the children, his prizing expression hardening with resolve, born of parental instinct, finally overriding self-interest. "Security, review the footage from my office immediately." Palmer commanded the legitimate security officer, who hesitated only briefly before complying, the feed appearing on the conference room's large display screen to reveal the damning conversation Zora had overheard. The color drained from Voss's face as her own words condemned her, but she recovered quickly, signaling her men who drew weapons with practiced efficiency, transforming the corporate dispute into a hostage situation in seconds. "This is unfortunate, Harrison. I had hoped to maintain our professional relationship, but you've forced my hand," Voss stated with chilling composure, gesturing toward the door with her weapon. "We'll be leaving now with both girls. Any attempt to stop us will have regrettable consequences for everyone in this building." Faced with immediate danger, Palmer looked desperately around the room before his eyes fell on Zora, whose expression reflected not just fear but active calculation as she assessed their surroundings with remarkable composure for a child her age. "The waste chutes," she whispered, recalling information from countless hours watching her mother navigate the building's service areas. "From the executive kitchen, they go straight to the recycling level. Too small for adults, but big enough for Lily and me." Palmer's initial disgust at the suggestion was evident in his expression, but as Voss began issuing instructions for their transfer to a secure location, He made a split-second decision that would forever alter the course of multiple lives. Feigning compliance. While positioning himself near the room's environmental controls, Palmer suddenly triggered the fire suppression system, filling the space with dense fog as sprinklers activated overhead, creating momentary confusion that allowed him to shove both girls toward the executive kitchen door while tackling one of Voss's men. "Run fifth door on the left behind the steel prep table," he shouted, as Zora grabbed Lily's hand and fled through the chaos, the sounds of struggle and shouted threats fading behind them as they navigated through the luxury kitchen to the service area Palmer had indicated. During their desperate escape through the building's waste management system, a tight metal slide that carried them 3 floors down amid the building's recyclable materials, Palmer's words echoed in Zora's mind. Particularly, his final instruction: find Maya Johnson. Tell her everything. The fact that he knew her mother's name raised questions Zora had no time to consider, as they emerged into the processing level disoriented and covered in paper dust, but temporarily safe from their pursuers. Their relief was short-lived, however, as they rounded a corner to find Maya herself being held by 2 of Voss's men, her expression a mixture of terror and fury as she struggled against her captors, who had apparently anticipated this escape route. "Mom!" Zora cried out, instinctively moving toward her mother before Maya's warning shout made her freeze. "Run, Zora. Take Lily, and go. These men aren't security. They hurt Tomas from maintenance when he tried to help me." One of the men holding Maya pressed a threatening hand against her throat, addressing Zora with cold calculation. "That's right, little hero. You and the blind girl come with us quietly, or your cleaning lady mother has an unfortunate workplace accident. Palmer Industries has such dangerous equipment down here after all." The impossible choice paralyzed Zora until an unexpected voice came from behind them. Palmer himself, having followed them down through conventional means, his expensive suit torn and bloodied, but his stance determined as he surveyed the scene. "Let her go, Ramirez. Your boss may own pieces of my company through shell corporations, but she doesn't own my soul. Not anymore." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion as Palmer triggered a nearby pressure valve, releasing a cloud of steam that momentarily blinded Voss's men, creating the diversion needed for Maya to break free and reach the children. As alarms blared throughout the building and legitimate security forces began responding to multiple emergency protocols, Palmer made a decision that revealed depths previously hidden beneath his privileged exterior. "Take this," he urged, pressing a small hard drive into Zora's hand as he guided them toward a service exit. "It contains everything, all of Voss's operations, including evidence of how she's been systematically discriminating against employees of color and manipulating property values in neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights. Get it to someone who can use it." Before any of them could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps forced another impossible choice, as Palmer positioned himself in the corridor, effectively becoming a human barrier between Voss's approaching men and the escape route. He now urged the others to take. "I'll hold them off. Go now and tell Lily." His voice broke momentarily before regaining strength. "Tell her I'm sorry, and that for once in my life I'm trying to do something right." As Maya led the girls away through the service tunnel that would take them outside the building's security perimeter, Zora looked back one final time to see Harrison Palmer, billionaire and flawed father, standing alone against Ent. Approaching danger, his expression reflecting not fear, but a strange peace, as though the weight of years of moral compromise had finally been lifted by one genuine act of sacrifice. The heavy security door closed behind them with a resolute thud, leaving them alone in the dimly lit passage with the stolen hard drive, a wealth of dangerous information, and the knowledge that powerful people would stop at nothing to silence them before the truth could destroy an empire built on exploitation and racial injustice. Rain poured from the darkening Chicago sky as Maya hurried the girls through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main roads where Voss's people might be watching her years of navigating the city's less privileged neighborhoods, now serving as their greatest protection. "My cousin Marcus lives 20 blocks from here," Maya explained breathlessly as they huddled beneath a store awning checking for pursuers before continuing their journey. He's an attorney, not corporate like Voss's people, but he'll know what to do with the information Palmer gave us." The mention of Palmer made Lily tighten her grip on Zora's hand, her voice small but determined as she asked the question weighing on all their minds. "Is my father going to be okay?" Neither Maya nor Zora had the heart to voice their true concerns, offering reassurances that felt hollow even as they spoke them. Marcus Davis lived in a modest brownstone in a transitional neighborhood. His law degree from Northwestern University displayed prominently in a small home office cluttered with case files from his work representing community members in disputes with landlords, employers, and occasionally the city itself. His initial reaction to their sudden appearance on his doorstep was shock, followed quickly by wariness when Maya explained the situation. "You want me to use evidence stolen from Palmer Industries to accuse Catherine Voss, one of the most powerful women in Chicago business, of orchestrating a kidnapping and engaging in systematic racial discrimination. Have you lost your mind?" "Maya, they'll destroy all of us before the first filing even hits a judge's desk." Marcus argued, pacing his living room while casting nervous glances at the windows, as though expecting Voss's men to appear at any moment. The debate was cut short when Marcus's television began broadcasting a breaking news report that froze everyone in the room. Chicago police are seeking information regarding a suspected kidnapping attempt at Lakefront Park today. Security footage appears to show this child, identified as Zora Johnson, luring the blind daughter of industrialist Harrison Palmer away from her caretaker. The screen filled with a grainy image of Zora leading Lily through the park, carefully edited to remove any context that would show they were fleeing from danger rather than creating it. The reporter continued, with barely disguised racial coding. "The suspect is from Oakwood Heights, an area known for elevated crime rates. Police caution that she may be working with adult accomplices and should be considered dangerous." The deliberate criminalization of a 7-year-old black girl made Maya cry out in anguish, while Marcus switched off the television, his expression hardening from reluctance to resolve. "They're not even trying to hide the racism. That's a child they're painting as a predator," he muttered, finally agreeing to examine the hard drive Palmer had entrusted to Zora. The data revealed far more than they had anticipated: years of emails documenting Voss's systematic discrimination against black employees at Palmer Industries. Deliberate disinvestment in neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights to drive down property values before redevelopment, and most damning of all, detailed plans for the fake kidnapping that would allow Palmer to collect a $20 million insurance policy while Voss's shell companies purchased controlling interest in his financially troubled company. As Marcus scrolled through document after document, his legal mind cataloging potential charges, Maya noticed Zora sitting quietly, with Lily patiently describing the room to help the blind girl create a mental map of their surroundings. TheRoomus.com. Two children finding comfort in each other despite the adult chaos swirling around them. Their moment of relative calm was shattered when Marcus's phone rang his neighbor, warning that suspicious men were questioning residents about visiting relatives while showing photos that sounded remarkably like Maya and the Price girls. With Voss's people closing in and law enforcement actively searching for Zora based on manipulated evidence, they needed a new strategy immediately. "What about Detective Washington?" Maya suggested, suddenly recalling the black female detective who had once visited the community center to speak about career opportunities in law enforcement. Amara Washington, she's with Chicago PD's Special Victims Unit. She seemed genuine when she talked to the kids about justice. Despite Marcus's skepticism about trusting any police given the current situation, they had few options remaining, leading him to make a carefully worded call requesting an urgent meeting regarding the Palmer case. Detective Washington agreed to meet them at a neutral location, arriving alone as requested, but with obvious reservations written across her professional demeanor. "You're asking me to believe a 7-year-old girl thwarted a professional kidnapping, uncovered a corporate conspiracy, and is now being framed by one of Chicago's elite business leaders," Washington summarized after hearing their story, her tone, making it clear how implausible she found the narrative, despite the evidence Marcus had begun to show her. The detective's skepticism wavered, however, when Lily suddenly spoke up. She doesn't believe us because most grown-ups think children don't notice things, especially a blind girl and a black girl who nobody listens to. Anyway, the simple truth in Lily's observation hung in the air until Zora added her own insight. You keep looking at the security footage they showed on TV, but did anyone check the audio recordings? I bet Lily can identify the fake caretaker's voice from the park. She has perfect pitch memory for voices. This unexpected suggestion created the breakthrough they needed as Washington, intrigued by the possibility of evidence that couldn't be visually manipulated, arranged for Lily to listen to voice recordings from Palmer Industries employees, including security personnel. When Lily unfailingly identified the kidnappers' distinctive vocal patterns among the samples, matching them to one of Voss's personal security team, the detective finally began to take their case seriously. Washington's growing belief in their story, however, proved to be a double-edged sword when she attempted to secure police protection for the group, only to have their location immediately leaked to Voss's people by a corrupt officer on her payroll. The subsequent car chase through rain-slicked Chicago streets forced them to abandon Washington's vehicle and flee on foot into Oakwood Heights, where Maya led them to the community center that had been Zora's artistic sanctuary since she was old enough to hold a crayon. Miss Jefferson, the elderly art teacher who had mentored generations of neighborhood children, took one look at their bedraggled, frightened group and ushered them inside without question, immediately calling community members who arrived within minutes to form a protective presence around the building. When Voss's men appeared on the street outside, attempting to intimidate their way inside with threats and flashed badges of questionable authenticity, they found themselves surrounded by Oakwood Heights residents, standing shoulder to shoulder in silent, immovable determination. The community's unified response, born from years of facing discrimination and external threats together, created a momentary stalemate that bought precious time for Washington to contact federal authorities who wouldn't be under blank ATE, Voss's local influence. As they waited for help to arrive, Zora noticed Lily sitting alone, her face troubled despite their temporary safety. "Are you okay?" she asked, settling beside her new friend, who turned sightless eyes in her direction with uncanny accuracy. "My whole life I've been protected from everything because I'm blind and because my father is rich," Lily responded thoughtfully. "But today I learned that being safe isn't the same as being sheltered. You live with danger every day, just because of your skin color, don't you?" The question, innocent yet profound from a 6-year-old's lips, deserved an honest answer. "Yes," Zora acknowledged softly. "My mom says I have to be twice as good and twice as careful as white kids, even when I'm just playing in the park." Today was scary, but for me there's always someone watching me, like I'm doing something wrong even when I'm just existing. Their conversation, bridging worlds that rarely intersected with such honesty, represented exactly what Voss and her allies feared most: genuine understanding across racial and economic divides that might someday challenge the systems benefiting from their separation. If you were witnessing this powerful moment between these two brave little girls, would you see it as the beginning of real change or just a temporary connection in a divided world? Comment number 1. If you believe children like Zora and Scrushan, Lily can help break down systemic barriers. Or number 2, if you think adult society will eventually force them back into separate worlds. Like this video if you're inspired by Zora's courage in standing up for truth against overwhelming odds. Subscribe to follow this incredible story to its conclusion, where we'll discover whether justice can truly cross the lines of race and privilege in America. Will the community of Oakwood Heights continue to stand strong against Voss's threats? Can Detective Washington find the evidence needed to clear Zora's name before it's too late? And what has become of Harrison Palmer, whose last act might finally have been one of redemption? News spread through Oakwood Heights with the speed and efficiency that only close-knit communities achieve, passing from apartment to storefront to church basement through hushed phone calls and urgent text messages rather than formal channels, carrying the essential truth that one of their children needed protection from powerful people who meant her harm. Within hours, the modest community center found itself transformed into an impromptu command post, as residents arrived offering whatever resources they could spare from Miss Jefferson's former students, now working in media, who began Poptit to Peel, countering the narrative of Zora as dangerous suspect with questions about corporate influence on local reporting to Mr. Washington, no relation to the detective who had driven city buses for 30 years and knew every backstreet and service road that might provide safe passage if evacuation became necessary. Inside the building, Zora sat with Lily in the art room, attempting to explain through simple drawings and honest words the reality of racial discrimination that shaped her daily existence, concepts that most adults found too uncomfortable to discuss, but which Zora navigated with the straightforward clarity of childhood. "Sometimes people decide things about me before they even know my name," Zora explained, as she guided Lily's fingers over a textured drawing representing different communities in Chicago. "They see my skin and my address and think they know everything important about who I am or what I can do." Lily nodded with unexpected understanding, her fingers tracing the boundaries Zora had created between neighborhoods. "People do that with my blindness, too. They talk about me instead of to me, or they speak really loud like I can't hear either. But I think it's different because people usually want to help me even if they do it wrong. They don't seem to want to help you. They want to blame you." The simple observation captured something profound that Detective Washington, overhearing as she coordinated with federal contacts, found herself unable to dismiss as she recalled her own experiences as both a black woman and police officer, navigating systems built to maintain rather than challenge existing power structures. Meanwhile, Maya had revealed her own hidden history to Marcus and Miss Jefferson as they reviewed the evidence on Palmer's hard drive, explaining how she'd once been a promising computer programmer at a major tech firm until a Plus-TIS project she developed was attributed to her white male colleagues, after which complaints about the discrimination led to her being blacklisted in the industry. "I couldn't get another tech job in Chicago, not even interviews, once they saw my name. That's how I ended up cleaning offices at Palmer Industries, watching people with half my skills make 5 times my salary while I scrubbed their coffee stains off expensive desks." Maya explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard, with the muscle memory of skills long suppressed but never forgotten, as she organized the evidence into categories that would best support both criminal charges and civil rights violations against Voss and her network. Outside, Voss's men had retreated temporarily after community members recorded and live-streamed their attempts at intimidation. But everyone understood this reprieve was temporary at best, especially after learning that Harrison Palmer had been found unconscious in Palmer Tower, following what company representatives were calling a medical episode, conveniently preventing him from either confirming or denying any aspect of the evolving situation. The community's determination to protect Zora crystallized into a more ambitious plan when they learned from Washington's federal contacts that Voss had scheduled an emergency board meeting at Palmer Industries for early the Palmer Industries following morning, clearly intending to consolidate control before any accusations could derail her takeover of the company. "We need to get this evidence into the right hands before that meeting, but every official channel is compromised by Voss's influence," Washington explained, surveying the room full of community members who had gathered to help. "What we need is a diversion big enough to let a small team enter Palmer Tower undetected." The suggestion might have seemed impossible hours earlier, but looking at the assembled residents of Oakwood Heights, many of whom had worked in or around Palmer Industries in service capacities that rendered them effectively invisible to executives like Voss, Washington realized they possessed a resource more valuable than any corporate security system: detailed knowledge of how the building actually functioned day to day. Former maintenance workers identified security camera, blind spots, kitchen staff, new delivery schedules, cleaning crews, could reproduce legitimate service badges, and countless other small pieces of institutional knowledge combined to create a comprehensive understanding of the building's actual vulnerabilities rather than its theoretical security. "We're not invisible because we're not important," declared Mrs. Rivera, who had supervised night cleaning crews at Palmer Tower for 15 years before being replaced by a contractor who hired undocumented workers at lower wages. We're invisible because they choose not to see us, and now we can use that against them. While adults planned the infiltration, Zora and Lily continued strengthening their unexpected friendship with Lily, sharing how her blindness had developed her other senses to remarkable levels, and Zora describing her artistic perspective on worry. To the world, each girl, recognizing in the other a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to navigate a world not designed for them. Their bond was tested when community lookouts reported police cruisers approaching the center, led by officers clearly responding to pressure from above rather than standard procedure. Detective Washington, prepared for this development, stepped outside to confront her colleagues, while live-streaming the interaction through Miss Jefferson's media contacts, forcing a public conversation about why so many resources were being devoted to apprehending a 7-year-old girl while ignoring evidence of corporate criminality. The resulting standoff attracted news helicopters and social media attention that paradoxically created both greater danger and greater protection, as the increased visibility made heavy-handed tactics more difficult for authorities to justify, but also alerted Voss to their location and strategy. When morning arrived after a tense night of preparation and vigilance, a carefully coordinated operation began with community members creating a massive, peaceful demonstration outside Palmer Tower, demanding investigation into discriminatory practices while carrying signs, with statistics drawn directly from the evidence on Palmer's hard drive. The public protest, covered extensively by media alerted by Miss Jefferson's former students, created the perfect diversion for a small team, including Maya Marcus Washington and 2 former Palmer Industries employees with intimate knowledge of the building's security systems, to enter through service entrances, their goal being the executive boardroom, where Voss's emergency meeting was already underway. Meanwhile, Zora and Lily remained at the community center, under the protection of residents who had formed a human chain around the building, their unified presence deterring any attempt to remove the children by force. The infiltration team navigated through Palmer Tower with the confident efficiency of people reclaiming spaces they had previously been allowed to occupy only as servants rather than equals, using security badges cloned from still active credentials and knowledge of patrol patterns to avoid detection. They reached the executive floor just as Voss was presenting her plan for restructuring to nervous board members, a corporate euphemism for the massive layoffs and community disinvestment that would follow her complete takeover. Washington's attempt to serve Voss with federal warrants triggered immediate chaos as private security personnel moved to intercept the intruders, creating a physical confrontation that spilled out of the boardroom into the executive reception area, where building security and actual police officers responding to the disturbance converged from multiple directions. In the confusion that followed, genuine law enforcement officers initially targeted Maya Marcus and other black team members rather than addressing the actual security threat posed by Voss's armed private guards, forcing Washington to physically position herself between her colleagues and fellow officers while shouting, "Federal investigation in progress, stand down." The tense standoff highlighted the very bias their evidence sought to prove, with armed white security personnel automatically given the benefit of doubt, while unarmed black civilians were treated as inherent threats despite carrying légitimate documentation. The situation teetered on the edge of disaster until the executive elevator opened unexpectedly to reveal Harrison Palmer himself, pale and moving, with obvious pain but very much conscious and determined as he surveyed the scene before him. As chairman of this board, I am calling this meeting to immediate order. Palmer declared, his authoritative tone cutting through the chaos and temporarily freezing all parties in place. Detective Washington and her associates are here, at my personal invitation, to present evidence of criminal activity within our corporate structure. Evidence I myself provided after becoming aware of activities being conducted in this company's name without proper board oversight or ethical consideration. Palmer's public support, completely altered the dynamic, creating the space needed for Washington to formally present the federal warrants, while Maya connected Palmer's hard drive to the boardroom's presentation system, displaying irrefutable evidence of Voss's criminal conspiracy, alongside years of documented racial discrimination that had systematically denied opportunities to qualified employees of color while disproportionately targeting communities like Oakwood Heights for exploitative development practices. As Voss was taken into custody, her expression of cold fury focused not on the authorities but on Palmer himself, her parting words revealing the depth of her contempt. "You're throwing away everything over some misplaced guilt about a blind kid and a black housekeeping brat. This company will collapse without my connections." Palmer's response, delivered with quiet dignity that surprised everyone who knew his previous character, provided the perfect summary of the transformation these events had catalyzed. Maybe it should collapse and be rebuilt as something better, something that serves all communities rather than extracting value from them. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to remember what actually matters. The arrest of Catherine Voss created immediate shockwaves through Chicago's business community, with Palmer Industries' stock plummeting as investors reacted to headlines describing criminal charges that included conspiracy kidnapping, fraud, and civil rights violations. Media coverage shifted dramatically as journalists began investigating the evidence presented by Detective Washington to federal authorities, particularly after Harrison Palmer held an unprecedented press conference admitting corporate wrongdoing and pledging full cooperation with all investigations. The public narrative around Zora transformed almost overnight from dangerous suspect to child hero. Though Maya noticed with bitter awareness how many news outlets seemed more comfortable portraying her daughter as an exceptional case, rather than acknowledging the systemic bias that had allowed her to be criminalized so easily in the first place. With federal authorities now handling the case and providing protection, Zora and Lily were finally able to give formal statements about the events in the park, with special accommodations made for both Lily's blindness and Zora's age, to ensure their testimony was recorded accurately without causing additional trauma. During this process, Zora noticed subtle inconsistencies between Palmer's public statements and what she had personally witnessed, small details that might seem insignificant to adults, but which her artist's eye for observation couldn't overlook. "Mr. Palmer said he only found out about the kidnapping plan after it happened, but I heard him talking to Miss Voss about gambling debts and insurance money," Zora whispered to her mother during a break in the proceedings. "He's still not telling the whole truth." Maya might have dismissed these concerns as misunderstandings if not for Lily's immediate confirmation from across the room, her enhanced hearing having picked up Zora's whispered observation. "Zora's right," Lily stated with the simple directness of childhood. "I remember my father's voice on the phone the night before it happened, saying everything was arranged for the event the next day. He sounded scared but definite." This revelation created a moral dilemma for Maya and Marcus, who recognized that while Palmer's current cooperation was instrumental in building the case against Voss and her network, his own culpability appeared greater than he had publicly admitted. The question of whether pursuing the complete truth would ultimately serve justice better than accepting a partial victory weighed heavily on them, especially considering what additional trauma might befall Lily if her father faced serious criminal charges. Detective Washington, overhearing these discussions, provided perspective from her years in law enforcement. Sometimes, perfect justice isn't possible within imperfect systems. The question becomes whether a partial victory that creates meaningful change is worth more than pursuing absolute accountability at any cost. The philosophical debate became immediately practical when federal investigators requested another interview with both girls, specifically to clarify Palmer's role in the initial conspiracy. Zora, displaying wisdom beyond her years, asked to speak privately with Lily before they made any decisions about what details to emphasize in their additional testimony. The two girls, now bonded through shared trauma and genuine friendship, sat together in the community center's art room, where they had first begun to understand each other's different yet connected experiences of navigating a world designed to exclude them. "Your dad did something really wrong," Zora acknowledged gently, knowing that sugarcoating the truth would disrespect the trust they had built. "But I think he was trying to fix it at the end when he helped us escape and gave us the evidence against Miss Voss." Lily nodded solemnly, her fingers tracing patterns on the table's surface, as she processed emotions too complex for most adults, let alone a 6-year-old. "He's the only family I have left since Mom died. If he goes to prison for a long time, what happens to me?" The question hung in the air, impossible to answer, with comfortable platitudes forcing Zora to confront the harsh reality that justice and mercy sometimes stood in direct opposition, with innocent people often bearing the heaviest consequences of either choice. Before they could reach any conclusion, their conversation was interrupted by urgent commotion outside as Marcus burst into the room, his expression grave as he announced, "Voss has been granted temporary release on bail pending trial, and we've just learned she's taken Miss Jefferson hostage at her home." The news hit the community like a physical blow, particularly Zora, who had spent countless hours under the gentle guidance of the elderly art teacher who had nurtured her talent and provided sanctuary when other spaces felt unwelcoming. Without hesitation, Zora declared her intention to join the group, heading to Miss Jefferson's small house near the community center, a decision Maya initially refused before recognizing the determination in her daughter's eyes and reluctantly agreeing on condition that Zora remain safely in the car with Lily under adult supervision. When they arrived at the scene, already surrounded by police who had established a perimeter but seemed hesitant to approach the house directly, Washington quickly assessed the situation and reported back that Voss was demanding the hard drive and all copies of evidence against her in exchange for Miss Jefferson's safety. Through police communications, they learned that Voss had chosen this specific target after discovering Miss Jefferson possessed additional evidence regarding Palmer Industries' discriminatory practices. Documentation she had been discriminatory practices, quietly collecting for years from former students who worked at the company and had experienced systemic barriers to advancement. The standoff escalated when Voss appeared briefly at a window, allowing Washington to establish communication while assessment teams determined potential entry points. During these tense negotiations, a shocking revelation emerged as Voss, perhaps believing she had nothing left to lose, revealed the true motivation behind her targeting of Palmer Industries and communities like Oakwood Heights. "Palmer was betraying everything we built by working with those community activists on urban renewal that would actually benefit residents," Voss declared, with undisguised contempt. "Real estate values in Oakwood Heights were supposed to bottom out completely before our development subsidiary moved in to purchase entire blocks at minimum cost." His sudden attack of conscience about displacement and gentrification threatened hundreds of millions in potential profit. The admission, captured on police recording equipment and immediately leaked to media by officers sympathetic to the community's struggle, exposed the calculated nature of corporate practices, often disguised as natural market forces, rather than deliberate strategies to extract wealth from vulnerable neighborhoods. As tactical teams prepared for potential forced entry to rescue Miss Jefferson, Zora slipped away from the car despite explicit instructions to remain with Lily, driven by personal connection to her mentor and understanding of the building's layout from countless afternoons spent in art classes. Using knowledge of a cellar entrance hidden behind overgrown garden shrubs, she managed to access the house undetected her small size, allowing her to navigate the tight space that would have challenged adult rescuers. Reaching Miss Jefferson's art studio, where Voss was holding the elderly teacher Zora, created a diversion by knocking over paint supplies in an adjacent room, drawing Voss away from Miss Jefferson long enough for the tactical team to make their entry through multiple access points. The resulting confrontation ended without violence, but with powerful symbolism as Voss, the embodiment of corporate power that had systematically exploited communities like Oakwood Heights, was led away in handcuffs past residents who had gathered behind police lines, their silent presence more impactful than any verbal condemnation could have been. In the aftermath, as Miss Jefferson received medical attention for minor injuries and exhaustion, she revealed to investigators that her documentation extended far beyond Palmer Industries to include similar patterns across multiple corporations operating in Chicago's predominantly black neighborhoods, evidence that would potentially support the largest civil rights class action lawsuit in the city's history. The revelation that one elderly art teacher had been quietly building a case for justice through years of patient documentation while powerful interests dismissed her as insignificant provided the perfect embodiment of how change often begins with those society has been conditioned to overlook. As Zora reunited with her mother, receiving both fierce hugs and stern reprimands for endangering herself, despite good intentions, she noticed Harrison Palmer arriving at the scene, accompanied by federal agents, his expression somber, as he surveyed the community gathering to support Miss Jefferson. When Palmer approached Maya Marcus in Washington to inquire about his daughter's whereabouts, Zora stepped forward with characteristic directness and asked the question adults had been carefully avoiding. "Are you going to tell the truth now about planning the kidnapping with Miss Voss, or are you still pretending you didn't know until after?" The question, delivered without accusation, but with unwavering expectation of honesty, created a moment of profound silence as Palmer looked into the eyes of the child who had saved his daughter and subsequently exposed the corrupt foundation of his business empire. His response, when it finally came, revealed the complex reality behind actions too easily categorized as simply good or evil in the moral shorthand of public narrative. "Yes, I agreed to the fake kidnapping as an insurance scam during financial troubles." Palmer admitted, his voice barely audible as he forced himself to maintain eye contact with Zora, rather than looking away in shame. "But I backed out when I realized Voss intended actual harm to come to Lily. By then, things had already been set in motion that I couldn't control." The confession, witnessed by law enforcement and community members alike, marked the beginning of a more complicated legal process that would ultimately require balancing accountability with practical considerations about Lily's well-being and the potential for structural reform that might benefit more people than simply punishing one individual, however deserving. 6 months later, Zora stood on the courthouse steps beneath a crisp autumn sky, her hand clasped firmly in her mother's, as reporters called questions about her feelings regarding the just-announced settlement that would fundamentally reshape Palmer Industries and its relationship with communities like Oakwood Heights. Behind them stood Harrison Palmer, noticeably thinner and humbler, following months of legal proceedings that had resulted in a complex plea agreement, losing control of his company but avoiding lengthy imprisonment in exchange for testimony that had proven crucial in dismantling Catherine Voss's extensive criminal network. The investigation had expanded far beyond the attempted kidnapping to reveal systemic discrimination throughout Chicago's corporate and legal structures, with evidence from Miss Jefferson's documentation supporting civil rights cases that would ultimately benefit thousands of residents in historically marginalized neighborhoods. Palmer Industries itself had undergone dramatic transformation, now operating under independent oversight, with Zora Johnson serving as the newly created Director of Community Investment and Inclusion, a position that utilized both her previously suppressed technical expertise and her lived experience of navigating discriminatory systems. The company had established a foundation, specifically tasked with supporting educational opportunities in underserved communities and addressing the damage caused by years of predatory corporate practices, with the Oakwood Heights Community Center receiving substantial funding for expansion into a full arts and technology campus, where children like Zora could develop their talents without financial barriers. Perhaps most significant for Zora personally was her evolving friendship with Lily Palmer, who now lived with her father's sister following his legal troubles, but spent several afternoons each week at the Johnson apartment, the two girls developing complementary creative projects that combined Zora's visual artistry with Lily's extraordinary musical abilities. Their unique communication system, born of necessity during their escape, had evolved into a form of artistic collaboration, with Zora describing colors through metaphors that Lily translated into musical compositions, creating multisensory experiences that had attracted attention from educators specializing in accessible arts programming. When asked by a well-meaning reporter what reward she wanted for her heroism, Zora had surprised everyone by requesting not personal recognition, but the establishment of a college scholarship fund, available to all children from Oakwood Heights, explaining, with simple eloquence, "There are lots of kids in my neighborhood who could do amazing things if they got the same chances other children get automatically." The request, amplified through media coverage, hungry for uplifting elements in an otherwise troubling story of corporate malfeasance, had sparked matching donations from companies seeking to distance themselves from Palmer Industries' arcade previous practices, ultimately creating an educational trust that would benefit generations of students. On this particular afternoon, following the final court proceedings that officially implemented the settlement agreement, Zora had asked to visit the park fountain where the entire ordeal had begun, a request both parents had hesitantly granted, with Detective Washington providing unobtrusive security, given that elements of Voss's organization remained unaccounted for despite extensive investigations. Seated at the same marble fountain edge where she had first noticed Lily and her service dog, 6 months earlier, Zora opened her sketchbook to a fresh page, while Lily, now accompanied by a new service animal named Hope, settled beside her, with a portable keyboard connected to headphones. "Describe what you're drawing." Lily requested, her fingers poised above the keys as she prepared to create accompanying music for whatever scene Zora was capturing. "I'm drawing us, but not just how we are now," Zora explained thoughtfully, her pencil moving with the increased confidence gained from months of intensive art classes funded by the settlement. "I'm drawing how we might be, when we're grown up, still working together but helping other kids who need someone to believe them when they speak truth to power." Lily nodded with understanding beyond her years, beginning to play a composition that somehow captured both present reality and future possibility, her musical gift translating emotional complexity into harmonies that drew appreciative attention from parkgoers passing nearby. As they worked together in comfortable collaboration, they discussed the children's book project they had conceived, with encouragement from Miss Jefferson Zora providing illustrations, while Lily composed an accompanying soundtrack that would make their story accessible to children with different abilities and learning styles. "Do you think our book will help grown-ups understand what happened from our perspective?" Lily asked her, unseeing eyes directed toward the fountain sounds with uncanny accuracy. Zora considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, her response reflecting the wisdom forced upon her by circumstances, but embraced with characteristic determination. "Maybe not all grown-ups, but some will listen. And more importantly, other kids will know they deserve to be believed, even when powerful people try to make them doubt themselves." In that moment of shared purpose between two children from worlds that rarely intersected meaningfully, the true impact of their ordeal became clear, transcending the legal proceedings, corporate restructuring, and media narratives, to represent something more fundamentally transformative, the recognition that justice, while imperfect and incomplete, begins with simple human connections across society's artificially constructed divides. As Maya and Harrison watched their daughters from a respectful distance, former employer and employee now connected through their children's unbreakable bond, Detective Washington articulated what they were all feeling. This is how real change happens, not just through policies and settlements, but through relationships that make it impossible to continue seeing others as abstractions rather than people. The observation captured the essence of what Zora and Lily had accomplished, beyond the dramatic rescue and explosive revelations, creating through their friendship the foundation for genuine healing in a society too often defined by inuit division. Their courage and compassion, providing a template for justice that acknowledged past harms while building toward a more equitable future. What do you think about this powerful story of courage, injustice, and ultimately hope, Has it changed how you might respond if you witness discrimination in your own community? Comment below with your thoughts on Zora and Lily's partain on Zora extraordinary journey. If you believe more stories like this one need to be told, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might be inspired by these brave girls, who proved that even the smallest voices can speak truth to power and create lasting change. Thank you for joining us for this emotional story of friendship across society's divides, and may we all find Zora's courage and Lily's perception in our own lives when facing injustice. This story powerfully illustrates how courage knows no age, race, or physical limitation. Through Zora and Lily's extraordinary journey, we witness the transformative power of seeing beyond societal labels and recognizing our shared humanity. Their story teaches us that systemic discrimination thrives in silence and separation, while connection and truth-telling are its greatest enemies. When Zora chose to help Lily despite the risks, she demonstrated that moral courage often requires acting without guarantee of being believed or protected, especially for those from marginalized communities. The alliance between these two children from vastly different worlds shows how authentic relationships can bridge divides that institutions and policies alone cannot. The story also reveals how discrimination becomes embedded in systems from corporate practices to law enforcement responses, creating environments where injustice appears normal until challenged by unexpected voices. It reminds us that change requires both individual bravery and community solidarity. Perhaps most importantly, Zora and Lily's friendship demonstrates that justice isn't merely about punishment, but about creating new patterns of relationship that make previous forms of exploitation impossible to sustain. True healing begins when we see others not as abstractions, but as full human beings deserving of dignity and opportunity. Their journey teaches us that even the smallest voices can speak truth to power when they refuse to be silenced by intimidation or disbelief. What would you do if you witnessed injustice happening right before your eyes? Would you find the courage to speak up like Zora, even when the system is stacked against you? Has there ever been a moment in your life where you had to choose between staying safe or doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how this story of bravery against discrimination resonated with you. If you believe in the power of courage to overcome prejudice and create real change, please hit that like button to help more people discover this important story. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge us to build a more just world together. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope and transformation, share this video with them today. Thank you for joining us on Zora and Lily's remarkable journey. May we all find their wisdom, bravery, and compassion when facing the barriers that divide us in our own communities. Together we can build the bridges that make a better world possible.